David Sorensen is the founder and CEO of Regentic Revolution, one of the nation's fastest growing wholesalers of aesthetic and regenerative medical devices. David has built a reputation for helping med spa owners, dermatologists, and cosmetic surgeons avoid the industry's most common and costly mistakes when purchasing equipment. His company delivers brand new technology at a fraction of traditional prices, backed by faster service, longer warranties, and a same-day support policy that manufacturers can't match. With years of experience in the aesthetic industry, David is on a mission to empower providers with unbiased advice, peer-to-peer knowledge sharing, and business strategies that maximize ROI without the high-pressure sales tactics. He's here today to share insights on how to navigate the aesthetics equipment market, grow a profitable practice, and protect yourself from six-figure mistakes. So, obviously, your man needs no introduction. I did that anyways. But let's get into
That was
it.
great. Glad to be here.
You really are on a mission to help providers not overpay. That's kind of like if you had a sword and shield, that would be on your shield. Like, don't overpay.
It would
Tell us a
be.
little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I started my career in aesthetics, I was purchasing pre-owned equipment for a company, and the biggest problem that we ran into over and over was that this equipment wasn't worth what they paid for it. It just wasn't something they would pay $160,000 for. They might be lucky to get $20,000 for it on the secondary market. So those are the types of six-figure mistakes that I'm talking about. Sales reps in this industry are very good at what they do, and they take aesthetic equipment buying and they turn it into an emotional process. And when people buy things with a lot of emotion, that's where I think a lot of mistakes are made. And so, a big conversation that I have almost every single day with providers is this tool that you're looking at buying going to do the job that you need it to do? And is the price reasonable for the technology that's there? And so that's kind of where things all started. And it turns out that almost every aesthetic practitioner does what I call or makes this mistake once at least, spends way too much money on a certain device or technology, and then is totally underwhelmed with the results. So
Yeah.
I try to help avoid those mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, that really rings true for me. I can definitely look at some of the purchases that I feel the worst about, and it's driven by emotion. How do you help your clients separate those two?
Simple questions about the reason for the purchase. Where are they getting their information from? If the only information they have about a device came from a sales rep, I would say 90% of the time it's not what they think it's going to be. Sales reps want you to believe that a brand name device is going to sell treatments by itself, that people are going to be Googling their brand for their specific brand name treatment, and then they'll come to your clinic in order to get it. That you won't even have to worry about marketing or anything like that, and patients will just come in and be willing to pay whatever the list price for the treatment is. Um, and it just isn't the case. And a lot of times, uh, providers will get so caught up in owning a certain brand or type of equipment. Maybe it's something that they've even used before at another clinic and they really like it. They get caught up in that and think that that's what they need in their clinic. And a lot of times, it sticking with a technology or a brand name that you're familiar with can be a good option. But at the same time, they really need to take a step back and say, okay, for my clinic and for my patients, what is it that my patients need? What do my clients want? What skin issues are they dealing with? Or maybe their self-image issues that they're dealing with that I can solve with the most effective technology, not necessarily the biggest, most expensive device.
Yeah. So talk to me about that a little bit. Let's say I'm sitting beside and the owner of a med spa right now. Maybe they would ask, what is your key differentiator? What do you bring to the table that these other salesmen don't?
Well, I don't really rely on my own expertise very often. I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I'm not the expert in any one category. But I've been working with aesthetic professionals over the last 7 or 8 years who are on the front lines, who are using these devices every day to treat patients in their clinic. And that's where you get the best information from other aesthetic professionals. And so I would say if you've talked to a sales rep and you haven't verified that with an owner of that same device or somebody who uses that technology on a day-to-day basis to really understand what results it can measurably achieve, what expectations you can set for your patients, you really need to go back to your peer network before you make any final decisions. And then what I do at the end, because I have access to all of the equipment, I just rely on whatever was recommended by, a trusted colleague or someone from their peer support network. I might add a little bit of information that I have or my perspective, but ultimately I think that these decisions should be made after having spoken to and consulted with other aesthetic professionals that know the technology, and exactly what it can achieve, and just cut out all of like the dream and the sparkles and the glitter, right? And just get down to what's the right tool to do the job that I need to get done.
Yeah, it's a really good perspective to have. And so when you're helping these clients make this decision, do you have, for example, like multiple like products that service the same thing and you kind of help them through, hey, do you want to pick this one or that one? Or what decisions are you helping them make?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of overlap in the technology too, from resurfacing lasers like CO2 and thulium and erbium to, different IPL systems. I mean, there's a lot of overlapping technologies. There's a lot of different ways you can treat pigment, redness, sensitivity, vascularity, and to resurface the face, whether you're doing something fully ablative and aggressive like a CO2 laser or something mild like a dermabrasion with crystals on the face that's just going to exfoliate the skin, to get that top layer off. So there's a lot of things you can do with less expensive equipment. And so if someone is a med spa owner and they're looking at devices and they haven't opened the doors yet, I'm going to make sure they've got all the basics covered. Your microneedling, a good exosome supplier, something, a good skincare line that's going to really help the patient's skin health. Because if you open your doors and you're doing fully ablative laser treatments to people who, don't have healthy skin, then you're setting yourself up for failure, right? Skincare is a journey in most cases. And so we need to start with the basics. You need to start with skincare. You need to do non-invasive treatments. And I especially like microneedling. Number one, because it's inexpensive, but number two, because you can treat about 30 indications with it and get really good results without ever needing to touch an energy-based device. And so I like to recommend products that are going to treat the symptoms that their patients are going to have most effectively. And very rarely do I go up into the high energy, fully ablative kind of devices.
Would you say that the high energy are would you say that they're less effective or what would you say is kind of the drawback there?
Well, a CO2 laser, for example, is fully ablative, and you can achieve better results with a fully ablative CO2 treatment than you can with anything else. It's hands down the most effective. However, you could be looking at 4 to 6 weeks of downtime with a treatment like that. A lot of patient hand holding afterwards, risk of infection, risk of scarring, risk of uh, hyperpigmentation. There's just a ton of risks with a device like that. Even though you can achieve the most dramatic results in the shortest amount of time, it's just not a smart thing to jump right into, right off the bat. And so I recommend, doing these treatments that maybe require a few more treatments, but also require your patients to come in more frequently. If you fixed all their skin concerns in one single shot and you never saw them again, it might be good for, revenue for a short amount of time, but it's not going to do much for developing these ongoing relationships. So you really got to be involved in people's skincare journey long term.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of upfront risk of being just too too much too fast, it's also obviously better relationship building to have those slow and steady really does win the race in this area.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's a really popular CO2 laser that's sold to a lot of aesthetic med spa type practices where they lower the energy and they do more treatments. And I just think that that particular device, with all the risks that it carries, is just better for, more like a plastic surgeon's office or something like that. So if you want to, have your own business and get good results, but also manage the liability that is associated with operating those kinds of devices, that's where I think my advice comes in and is really helpful.
Yeah. So what are some other, red flags med spa owners should watch out for when dealing with equipment vendors?
Fact check everything the sales rep says. If, like I said, find an online Facebook group, find a peer support group, look up the device. Go to the physician finder on the manufacturer's website, find someone who owns it and talk to them if you have any specific questions about whether or not that device really does what the sales rep said. If it's really generating that much revenue, or if it's just sitting in a closet going totally unused, which is the case about 50% of the time for a lot of these devices. So, yeah, fact check everything the sales rep says. If he says something that sounds good to be true, then check with somebody else and see. You can do all of this research on your own in a very short amount of time. You can just Google the questions. You can find them on social media and Facebook. Everyone's asking the same questions. And there will be somebody out there that either believed the sales rep and made an expensive mistake and doesn't want you to do the same thing. Um, you know, Aesthetic professionals are very helpful to one another, especially one who's made a mistake will really look out for the others and try to get them not to do the same things. So I would just say trust the information from your peer network more so than any sales rep. Sales reps don't have any skin in the game for liability. They don't have to hold themselves accountable for what they tell you the device can or can't do or how much money you're going to make with it. So you have to understand that, if a sales rep tells you you're going to make $40,000 in 30 days with this device, they'll never have to be held accountable to making that statement. And so um, just don't believe everything you hear and double check everything because the information's out there and it's available and it's not difficult to find.
Yeah. So I think this already arms, med spa owners with a lot of really valuable information. Getting back to some of the positives, when just hearing you, I'm newer to the med spa space myself, but hearing you talk about some of these emerging technologies, it really does sound like science fiction almost. I
Mhm.
mean, what are some of the emerging technologies that you're most excited about, and when do you think they'll be accessible to most med spa owners?
That's a great question. And there's not a ton of, I would say, emerging technologies. There are things that not a lot of med spa owners have, like Erbium, but has been around for a long time. Providers are learning new ways to use it, but at the same time, there hasn't been any really big changes on the way that light or energy interacts with tissue on somebody's skin. One to watch right now, I would say, is radio frequency microneedling. It was a really popular treatment and had a really big brand name pushing it for a long time. And most 90% of med spas own some type of RF microneedling device. But now a big concern is this post GLP-1 weight loss that's creating laxity in the skin and the face. And a lot of these RF microneedling companies are now coming out with jawline sculpting protocols for their device. And so radio frequency energy and skin tightening for the face and kind of facial sculpting, I think, is going to be really popular with how effective these GLP-1 compounds were for massive weight loss. And so um, things that are going to deal with the issues that, people are going to deal with. I think this one trend is probably going to carry on for quite a while now. People are going to have rapid weight loss due to these compounds and they'll need, facial contouring. Whether you're really good with Botox or fillers or energy-based devices like CO2 is great for tissue contraction, or radio frequency energy to tighten up the skin. But knowing the right combination of devices that you can use to achieve the most dramatic results and shorten healing times I think is something to stay on the cutting edge of.
Yeah, and speaking of the cutting edge, looking ahead for the next 5 years, how do you see equipment pricing and technology changing, and how should owners prepare now?
That is a really great question. The big industry names I don't think are going anywhere, and I don't think their prices are going to come down. Um, Aesthetic practice owners, um, people like to get into the industry because it's a lucrative industry. It's a cash pay business, and so it's a space where the owners of the company either are, licensed MDs, NPs, PACs, that are easily that can easily qualify for large amounts of money. So there's always going to be these really big, expensive devices in the space that are always saying that they can do more new things. More often than not, a system will just get a new shell or they'll put a touch screen on it, but the energy is still the same. I mean, tissue can only handle so much energy. It's not like you can put more energy into someone's face because you've got to deal with things like burning and hyperpigmentation. Um, but that being said, I think that providers are getting smarter, and I think that they're talking to each other more, and these professional networks are becoming more um, places that they can go to get better information. I always try to simplify my technology to help med spa owners know that when my device costs 25% what the manufacturer's cost, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the technology isn't as good. I love using microneedling pens for this example. It's one of the most simple devices out there. It's a motor basically and a battery, and there's just not $5,000 to $7,000 worth of technology built into them, and so I don't know how manufacturers justify those costs. And so while the main players are going to stay very expensive, I think permanently, and their prices will only go up, um, I think more equipment is going to be more accessible to a smarter consumer who is really just looking for, like I said at the beginning, the right tool for the job and not necessarily the biggest, most flashy name brand device they can find. So I think it'll go both ways.
David, thank you so much for your time. I think this gives people a lot of valuable information, and if I were a med spa owner tomorrow, I'd go with you.
Sounds great. Appreciate that.